Welcome to 2.2. So today we're going to cover syllabus objective, identify the structures and functions of the brain and spinal cord. I will try to go quick. There is a lot to cover here. It is going to be the foundation of a lot of the things you'll be doing your assignments on this week, right? So we're definitely talking about portions of the central nervous system today. Right? The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain controls how we think, learn, move, and feel. The spinal cord carries messages back and forth between the brain and the nerves that run throughout the body. So if you take a look at this image, they left the eyes in. I'm not quite sure why, but this is a human brain. You see the cerebrum and the cerebellum, and then that big, thick cord going down is the spinal cord. That is the central nervous system. All of these branching nerves that you see coming off of the spinal cord in this image are the peripheral nervous system. The brain is like the computer of the body, and it is sending things down this main spinal cord, which then sends out the messages to the rest of the body throughout these branching nerves that come off of it. So the brain itself is a complex organ made up of specialized nerve and supportive tissues. It is surrounded by many bones that together form the skull, which we learned about in MTC 105. The part of the skull where the brain sits is called the cranium. The base or lower part of the brain that is connected to the spinal cord. Together, the brain and spinal cord are known as the central nervous system. Many nerves send electrical signals to and from the brain and spinal cord. There are literally billions of nerve cells of various types. All right, structure and function of the brain. This image is kind of cool. This is a dyed cadaver. As you can see in here, the brain isn't as round and robust in this image as we usually think, because every body is different, and everybody's brain is shaped or squished a little bit differently. This is what it looks like in someone. As you can see, there's very little space in there. It is labeled. I think this is a really cool image for you to see, rather than all of these nice cartoon images they're of this like big juicy round brain. This is what it potentially looks like inside of the body. The brain is the body's control center. It constantly receives and interprets nerve signals from the body and sends new signals based on this information. Different parts of the brain control movement, speech, emotions, consciousness, and internal body functions such as heart rate, breathing, and body temperature. All right. Brain has three main parts. That is the cerebrum. That is this portion here. Cerebellum, which is this wrinkly part here, which we will look at in just a little bit. And the brain stem. All right. The brain is made of two types of cells: nerve cells, which we talked about yesterday, neurons. Those are the cells that carry the electrical signals that make up the nervous system. They cannot be replaced or repaired. You are born with all of the neurons that you're ever going to have. If they are significantly damaged, they do not come back. Now, there is some peripheral nervous system healing. It takes about 22 years, 25 years for a nerve to heal with that. But with the central nervous system, if they get severed, they're done. They're absolutely done. You can make new nerve pathways, but you cannot regrow a nerve. The nerve cells, the neurons, are the longest cells in the body. There are also glial cells that we talked about yesterday, neuroglial cells. Remember, those are the cells that support, feed, protect, control the neurons, all right? There are 4 types of neuroglia found in the central nervous system. Those are the astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, the epidermal cells, and the microglia. All right. And remember, the microglia remove all the cell debris, waste, and pathogens by phagocytosis. Astrocytes we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Remember, the astrocytes maintain the blood-brain barrier and preserve the chemical environment by recycling ions and neurotransmitters, all right? They also control the potassium ions to make sure that we have chemical energy being available to us. So the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, all right? That's the huge part that you think of when you think of the brain. It is divided into two halves. They are called the left and right cerebral hemispheres. Hemi meaning half, sphere meaning, a circular shape, all right? So half of a sphere, all right? So your brain is divided in two by a bridge of fibers called the corpus callosum. The right half of the cerebrum, which is called the right hemisphere, controls the left side of the body. The left half of the cerebrum, the left hemisphere, controls the right side of the body. Now, here's another cadaver brain. This one's a little bit more rounded for you. What we see is like a typical drawn brain. And here's a cartoon image down here of a brain which looks significantly more rounded than the actual cadaver that we just saw. The cerebral cortex is the outer folded part of the brain, all right? It's called the gray matter. The cerebral cortex is mostly made up of the cell bodies and dendrites of nerve cells. Remember, they're called neurons. Cell bodies contain the nucleus and other main parts of the cell. The dendrites are the short branching fibers that receive signals from other nerve cells. The inner part of the cerebrum is called the white matter. It is mostly made up of the long fibers of a nerve cell. Remember the axon that comes out that we saw that had all those myelin sheaths on it that send signals to and from the brain to the rest of the body. The fatty coating that surrounds axons, the myelin sheaths, give this part of the brain a whitish appearance, all right? So the white portion that we're seeing is actually just the coating on the long tails of these nerve cells. This folded bit up here is the cerebral cortex. Each hemisphere, all right, the left and right hemisphere is divided into 4 sections called lobes. These include the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobe. Do those sound familiar to you? They should, because these lobes are named off of the bones that they are adjacent to. The frontal lobe controls movement, speech, behavior, memory, emotions, and intellectual functions, such as thought processes, reasoning, problem solving, decision making, and planning. If you have damage to your frontal lobe, it could literally change your personality and your ability to function reasonably or logically. The parietal lobe controls sensations such as touch, pressure, pain, and temperature. It controls the understanding of size, shape, and direction, called spatial orientation. That's where you are in the world. So a lot of the sensations that your clients are going to receive and understand from the massage experience are going to come from their parietal lobe. The temporal lobe controls hearing, memory, and emotions. The dominant one, left side in most right-handed people, temporal lobe also controls speech. The occipital lobe towards the back of the head controls vision. All right, the cerebellum, also known as the little brain, is located under the cerebrum at the back of the brain. It is divided into 2 parts, or hemispheres again, and also has gray and white matter. It's this one that looks wrinkly, like a little walnut shoved up underneath the rest of the brain. The cerebellum is responsible for movement, posture, balance, reflexes, complex actions like walking and talking at the same time, and collecting sensory information from the body. When you are doing this practice makes perfect and you're practicing, taking shots in basketball, that type of thing, this is where you are learning and storing all of that information. The brain stem is a bundle of nerve tissue at the base of the brain. It connects the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. The brain stem has 3 areas. There is the midbrain, also called the mesocephalon, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. The brainstem sends information to and from the other parts of the brain to the rest of the body, and it controls breathing, body temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, hunger and thirst, and the digestion of your food. So it is controlling a good portion of your enteric nervous system that we talked about. Cerebral spinal fluid, liquid gold, the water of the gods. All right. When you get a lumbar puncture, is pictured here. They usually draw cerebral spinal fluid from this area if they need to test it for things like bacterial meningitis. It is a clear, watery liquid that surrounds, cushions, and protects the brain and spinal cord. The CSF also carries nutrients in the blood to and removes waste products from, remember using microglia, the brain. It circulates through chambers called ventricles, which are chambers in the brain, and over the surface of the brain and the spinal cord. It's constantly washing and bathing the brain. There are also meninges. The brain and spinal cord are covered and protected by 3 layers of tissue called membranes that are labeled the meninges. There is dura mater, which is the thickest outer membrane. There's the arachnoid layer, which is the middle thin membrane. All right, I have them pictured here at the bottom. If you have the lecture blown up, you should be able to see this on the bottom right here labeled for you. And the pia mater, it is the inner thin membrane. All right, it's not this bone that you see here or any of this spongy material. It is this thin layer that the dot is actually landing on. The cerebral spinal fluid flows in the space between the arachnoid layer and the pia mater. This space is called the subarachnoid space, all right? It's below the arachnoid space, so subarachnoid space. The corpus callosum is a bundle of nerve fibers that allows communication between the 2 cerebral hemispheres. All right, we brought that up earlier. Remember, it's that thick bundle of nerve fibers. It is the largest fiber bundle in the brain. The thalamus is the structure in the middle of the brain that has 2 lobes or sections. Again, all right, more hemispheres. It acts as a relay station for almost all information that comes and goes between the brain and the rest of the nervous system in the body. You can see it here pictured in green. I've got a label going over to it so that you can see it. And this image on the upper left-hand side is the corpus callosum. You see how thick that is and how tight that banding is holding those 2 hemispheres together. The hypothalamus in this middle image here, it is pictured in blue. The hypothalamus is a small structure in the middle of the brain below the thalamus. It plays a part in controlling body temperature, hormone secretion, blood pressure, emotions, appetite, and sleep patterns. The pituitary gland, which is pictured over here on the right-hand side in this little circle, all right? It looks like 2 little cherries dangling down here inside. It's actually quite small. And there's a blown up image of the posterior lobe and the anterior lobe, as well as the pituitary stalk. You can also see the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is right over it. If you look carefully in the image that has the hypothalamus in blue, you can see those 2 little nubs right beneath it. My mouse is going around them right now. If you're looking at the screen, that is the pituitary gland. It's a small pea-sized organ in the center of the brain. It's attached to the bottom of the hypothalamus and makes a number of different hormones that affect other glands of the body's endocrine system. It receives messages from the hypothalamus and releases hormones that control the thyroid and adrenal gland, as well as growth and physical and sexual development. The pineal gland is a very small gland in the 3rd ventricle of the brain. It produces the hormone melatonin, which influences sleeping and waking patterns as well as sexual development. It's pretty cool. I know that we talked about biological rhythms in MTC 105. I may have mentioned that there is a pineal scale on the top of some lizards' heads, like iguanas, where you can cover up that, and it's actually a light sensing organ. And you can convince some lizards that it's nighttime and sleepy time because you have cut off light coming in through and them getting those light signals basically to their pineal gland. You convince them that it's nighttime. The choroid plexus. The choroid plexus is a small organ in the ventricles that makes cerebral spinal fluid. So it is pictured down here. You can see all of this blue. This is a pretty good image going around the brain stem, the cerebellum, and everything. You can see all of this blue here that I'm circling with my mouse. This is cerebrospinal fluid that is circulating in there and bathing the brain and removing the waste. Cranial nerves. We're going to talk about these in detail in your attendance question. You probably already saw it, hopefully. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves that perform specific functions in the head and neck, including giving us our sense of smell, sight, vision, hearing, taste, speech, feeling in the face, and movement of the muscles in the face, eyes, and tongue. One pair of nerves starts in specialized cells in the roof of the nose, and another pair starts in the retina of the eye. The other 10 pairs start in the brain stem. So I'm just going to repeat that. So you have 12 pairs, 10 of them start in the brain stem, but one actually starts in the retina of the eye, and another one starts in the roof of your nose. I just find that absolutely fascinating. You can pause me here if you want to look at this image. This is a pretty cool image, I think. All of the various nerves, what their numbers are, what their name is, and what they control. This is a pretty cool image, I think. Now, your blood-brain barrier. Okay, here's an image before I start explaining it. This image on the left here that I'm circling is a normal blood vessel. And you have water-lined pores, and you have these pore passages so that things move easily in and out of your vascular system to allow nutrients to go out, waste to come in, and fluids to be interchanged in this extracellular space. In the brain blood vessels, you have these incredibly tight junctions. There are no pores that you see in a normal blood vessel throughout the rest of the body. And then they are also surrounded by this glial cells, all right, in this case, astrocytes, to protect any of this blood from coming out into the brain and to make sure that the microglia can get the waste products in, but only small particulates of nutrients are coming out, being grabbed by the astrocytes. You can see the astrocytes here in pink, absolutely covering this blood vessel that would be in the brain here in this bottom image, to make sure that we don't have any blood leakage around the brain and that we have a very controlled environment for nutrients and potassium ions, all right? The blood-brain barrier is a specialized system of cells lining blood vessels in the brain. The blood-brain barrier prevents most substances in the blood from passing into the brain and helps maintain a constant environment so the nerve cells in the brain can work properly. The blood-brain barrier is made up of very small blood vessels, all right? The capillaries, hello, words are hard for Mrs. Ellis, that are lined with thin, flat endothelial cells, all right? In other parts of the body, endothelial cells have small spaces between them that allow substances to move in and out of the capillary. So that's what I was showing you in this image up here on the left. They have these pore passages normally so that these nutrients, these larger macronutrients can reach other cells and tissues. But in the brain, the endothelial cells are packed tightly together, as shown in this image right here on the right. You see how that red is almost like a perfect circle with just a tight closed line. It's packed tightly so that substances cannot pass out of the bloodstream into the brain. We don't want chemicals that don't belong in the brain causing any issues with nerve function. All right, structure and function of the spine. We've talked about the spine a lot in MTC 105, but this is a refresher for you. And something cool, I don't think I mentioned the clivus. All right, the clivus is Latin for slope, or the Blumenbach clivus is a bony part of the cranium at the base of the skull. It's a shallow depression behind the dorsum sellae of the sphenoid bone. Remember the sphenoid's up there by your nose. It slopes gradually to the anterior part of the basilar occipital bone at its junction with the sphenoid bone. It extends to the foramen magnum. It is related to the pons and the abducens nerve. All right, so you're seeing a number 6. All right, and there is an image here. This one on the bottom right, you can see the clivus right here. It's actually quite large. And it's this foramen magnum, all right, that's the hole that your spinal cord comes out, remember? There is actually the clivus right there, sort of protecting and encapsulating like the bottom portion of your brain in there. I think that's pretty fascinating, and I wish that the textbook had covered that in MTC 105. This actually isn't in your textbook. I pulled it out for you guys in case you get asked what the clivus is on the MBLEC. And I was pretty surprised that your textbook didn't have it. So here it is, surprise. If you don't listen to these lectures, you're not going to know about the clivus. The spine is made up of 26 bones divided into 5 sections. These bones surround and protect the spinal cord, all right? This includes 24 vertebrae that are divided into the cervical, which is up here in purple, the thoracic, which is here in yellow, and the lumbar regions down here in green. There's also the sacrum here in blue and the coccyx in yellow, all right? Now the sacrum is sort of one conjoined unit. That's why we call it 5 sections, with the major stars of the show being, of course, the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar portions of the spine and their associated vertebrae. Remember, in the cervical region, there are 7 vertebrae, pictured here in green. Thoracic, there are 12 vertebrae, pictured here in orange. Lumbar, there are 5 vertebrae, pictured here in purple. The sacrum is a large section of fused vertebrae at the base of the spine, pictured here in pink. And there is the coccyx, all right? That is a small, thin section of fused vertebrae at the end of the spine, pictured here in like this moss green. All right, remember, between the vertebrae are the intervertebral discs. Inter meaning in between, vertebral meaning vertebrae. So in between the vertebrae are these cartilaginous discs, all right? A disc is a layer of cartilage found between the vertebrae. Discs cushion and protect the vertebrae and the spinal cord. Now remember, the spinal cord does not run down in between all the vertebrae. That is where your discs are cushioning everything. Your spinal cord actually runs in the hollow section in between them, with all of your nerves coming out between them in these foramen that you see pictured on the side image off to the far right. The spinal cord, here's an image of that bad boy. This, not this big disc here, okay, and not this blood vessel, but this big fleshy looking thing towards the back that my mouse is circling in this top image on the left here. That is your spinal cord. There's another image here below it of it pulled out. This is the spinal cord, and you can see nerves coming off of it, branching off of it to the side. Here's a cartoon image of it up here in the upper right, and a body image of what it looks like with the top portion of the vertebrae peeled away, the posterior part of the vertebrae cut off, so you can see the spinal cord and how those nerves come out into these various plexus or singular nerves coming out of the spine. The spinal cord is a thick column of nerves surrounded by vertebrae that runs from the brainstem to the lumbar region of the spine. Like the brain, the spinal cord has both gray and white matter. The spinal cord sends information between the brain and most of the body through the spinal nerves. Spinal nerves are pairs of nerves that exit the vertebrae along the length of the spinal cord. At the lumbar region, the spinal cord branches into a group of spinal nerves that exit the lumbar vertebrae and sacrum. The spinal nerves control body functions like movement, bladder and bowel control, and breathing. The spinal nerves are numbered after nearby vertebrae, all right? So you can see them coming out here in yellow in this bottom right image. They are literally labeled after the number of the spine that they're at. So if they're like by T1, T12, something, they will be labeled with those. And you guys do have an assignment that will help you with these naming of the nerves. That is all I have for you today. That is the bulk of the central nervous system. I wish you guys the very best today and this evening, and I will see you guys tomorrow. If you have any questions on your assignments or you need help locating some of the information in your textbook, don't be afraid to reach out to me and ask for help, and I will certainly get that information to you. All right. Have an excellent evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.